right. Well, now we can go to somebody who, suffice to say, must have run a decent enough campaign because he basically won the election. Samuel J. Tilden.
That is correct. Samuel J. Tilden should have been your president, and it was fucking stolen. One fun fact with you, 1876 is the election with the highest percentage of voter turnout at nearly 82%.
Right. Yes. Damn.
So,
So
a few things
82% of
about
people
Tilden.
showed up to only get fucked.
Yes. Oh. This 1876. We're gonna make some 2020 references here too. Now, a few things about Tilden. He was anti-slavery before it was cool, but he dropped it early in his political career. So he's a free soiler, but then by the 1850s, he didn't care anymore. Supported Lincoln, war Democrat, but not like a Seymour war Democrat where he's like highly critical. No, he's a very solid war Democrat, successful corporate lawyer. In New York, seen as a reformer because he took on Tammany Hall. He was allied to Seymour, by the way. He is considered by some one of the first real modern candidates in many ways. He had a coherent publicity agency that was called a literary bureau, used newspapers very effectively, great organizer. He especially was also good at compiling numbers. His team was very good at predicting how close elections would be and by what margins. By the way, he is sometimes considered the man who popularized the phrase "see you later."
Really?
Yeah, because he said it a lot. Because it was his way of evading a direct answer or ridding himself of a pesky caller. So he would often tell people, "see you later."
Huh.
And that's really Tilden's. If Tilden had any problem, Tilden was a rather indirect man. Considered indecisive, very secretive. He was hard for the Republicans to attack because of his fight against political corruption, if you will, and because during the war he had not done anything. He had not really done much that would have painted him as like a secret Confederate or something. But I did find one really good quote in the Mark Summers book, Rum, Romanism, and Rebellion. A newspaper editor called Samuel J. Tilden the most utter old spinster that was ever bent on a presidential masturbation.
Wow.
Yeah, the most utter old spinster that was ever bent on presidential masturbation. All right, there you go.
To be fair, though,
anyway,
they did not live to
What's up?
see the neoliberal era, so.
The Democratic Party was divided on issues of reform. You had Democrats who were very much for reform, others who were against. The hard versus soft money, if you will, was a very real debate the Democrats had throughout the late 1800s within their own party ranks. When the election goes the way that it does, it can be argued that Tilden failed to take advantage. One of Tilden's advisors actually said, while he was as inanimate as a gorged anaconda, the prize slipped from his grasp. The idea is that he did not actively try to secure the presidency when the compromise of 1876 is going on. He also did not want to endorse violence. When I say endorse violence, you had crowds in America gathering, yelling, "Tilden or blood." And so there was a very real fear, and keep this in mind, throughout Reconstruction, there was a very real fear the Civil War was going to start again. Understandably so, it just ended, huh?
Right.
Well, 1876 is when that fear pegs its highest. They believe there are mobs running around, there is violence in the streets, and Tilden will not endorse the violence. And not just that, on March 3rd, the House of Representatives, because the House went Democrat, convened and voted, as the House did, that Tilden was president. That's what they voted. It was somewhat of a last-ditch effort to maybe try to bring Tilden back out, maybe refute the compromise. Tilden refused even that. So it could be argued that Tilden's lack of killer instinct, his being secretive and indecisive, prevent him from becoming president when he'd essentially won the presidency. It also should be kept in mind the way the South acted at this time. The southern states that were still under Reconstruction wanted out from Reconstruction, so they backed Hayes to get out. At the same time, Republicans believed they could make inroads with those Democrats, with the Southerners who had backed Hayes. One of which was Randall Gibson. I just finished a biography of him. He was a Confederate general and then a Louisiana politician. And I mentioned Randall Gibson because Randall Gibson played a part in the 1876 Compromise. Grant really liked him, and Hayes offered him a position in his cabinet, but Gibson turned him down. And that really should have been the indication that, hey, the southern states who backed Hayes did it so they could end Reconstruction. They're not going to be going Democrat. I mean, they're not going to be going Republican, you know? Anyway, another fun fact about Tilden. Tilden was quite wealthy, but he didn't use his money during the campaign. And also, unlike Grant, he was very bad at raising money. So Tilden's campaign, while very well run, was also perennially underfunded. So, you got any thoughts on Tilden?
He's a difficult one to assess. My favorite Tilden story is that in 1880 he wanted to win the nomination again, but he went about it in a very passive-aggressive manner. So he said that he would take
Classic
it
Tilden.
if offered unanimously, and then also said that maybe his health wasn't the best. So he thought this meant that it was a clear hint that he wants it. But people took it as, oh, he's not interested. And then they moved on, and that's how you get the Winfield Scott Hancock.
Yeah.
And apparently he was kind of pissed off that they didn't take his hint correctly. But passive aggression does not work. Bottom line, it doesn't work. And that's proof positive. Tilden could have had the nomination in 1880, didn't get it, because he couldn't just say, I would like to be nominated. Had he said, I would like to be nominated, he probably would have gotten it. Because a lot of people were waiting with bated breath to see what he would do. And when he decided not to run, then this guy who had proven that he could win stepped aside, and they had to go with somebody else, and they did. Let's see, is there anything else interesting about Tilden's campaign? So apparently the major issues in 1876 were trying to make it easier for naturalized citizens to travel abroad, so I guess getting them documentation and letting them visit their home countries. So again, the Democrats were already pro-immigrant. He wanted to restrict Asian immigration, so that's the one where the Democrats and Republicans agreed. He was in favor of tariff reform, and he was opposed to land grants for railroads. Those were his major issues. And then both parties were about civil service reform and ending Reconstruction. Interestingly enough, both he and Hayes were known as reforming governors who were anti-corruption. The problem for Hayes, of course, is that the outgoing Republican president, Grant, was known for corruption above all else. So Hayes had less standing on the issue than Tilden did, because Tilden was from the party out of power. And it's hard to assess him. I mean, clearly he did enough to win.
But then he loses anyway, so he has problems politically.
Right.
But on the one hand, his thing about campaigning with like the publicity, with the literary bureau, if you will, and the number crunching, he is a candidate who starts to look more like what we see in political campaigns today.
Right.
I know. My thought is a B. You agree with that?
Yes, I have B written down here too. I can't go higher than that because he, unlike Aaron Burr, he did not have the lawyerly approach to trying to litigate his way to the office after he had already won it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is a fairly interesting guy. He didn't really do that much interesting after his run, but he did make a pretty strong bid.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, even though Tilden lost, he really did become this rallying cry for Democrats, if you will.
Yeah, and I think between this and 1868, I think Tilden especially shows that the Democrats were still viable, and that gave them confidence for the rest of the Gilded Age.
Yeah, it should also be noted that Tilden, for that reason, has a lot of stuff named after him in America. Just like random towns, counties, lots of streets, you know? I mean, for a failed presidential candidate, it's a ton of shit, you know?
True. Tilden is still fairly well remembered, but I guess being a governor in New York will do that because it's such a powerful state. I mean, Al Smith, another guy who will be on here, he's got a dinner named after him that everybody in Washington is forced to attend. So
Really? Okay, we'll get to that later.
yeah.